Unused state properties, including former schools, will be converted to temporary accommodation by the end of this year for around 25,000 healthy migrant workers.
There will be a short to medium-term arrangement to house the workers and will eventually be replaced by new purpose-built dormitories which will be constructed to house up to 100,000 workers in the long term.
It is something that the government is committed to do, but I would also say that Singaporeans have to do our part as well, because in land-scarce Singapore, it is inevitable that some of these new dormitory sites would be quite near residential areas. So all of us must do our part by rejecting the not in my backyard mindset. We really need to appreciate the contributions of all that our migrant workers have been doing and will continue to do in building Singapore, and welcome them as part of our community.
So we want to highlight the NIMBY, or not in my backyard mindset. Joining us is nominated MP Walter Theseira. He's also an associate professor from the School of Business at the Singapore University of Social Sciences. Welcome, Professor Theseira. So some of the 36 temporary sites are located in the middle of residential estates. Some people are concerned about security, property prices in their area, as well as public health, among other things. Do you think these are reasonable concerns, or is it more of a NIMBY mindset?
Well, these are not concerns that are unique to Singaporeans. When you look worldwide, you see that immigrants actually evoke the same concerns everywhere. However, these concerns are often based on stereotypes that may not be strongly related to reality. I mean, think about concerns about public security and safety. Many people worldwide believe that immigrants are associated with higher crime rates. But when you actually look at the data, you find that there's not much evidence to support this belief at all. So people have stereotypes about the behavior of migrants, which actually isn't the same as the real behavior, what the data actually supports. When it comes to property prices, I think there you need to think about it a bit more, because you need to understand that in many countries, the reason why migration is connected with lowering of property prices is because neighborhoods over time turn over from locals to migrants. That's how you get migrant areas like Chinatowns and so on worldwide. And what happens is that the migrants often are of lower income than the natives, so that tends to lower property prices. But Singapore is very different, and the reason why Singapore is different is we are not talking here about having migrant workers, for example, buying over HDB flats and things of that sort. The plan, I believe, is very much to spread them throughout the island. So I don't think there should be any concern about neighborhoods turning over or changing over to migrants the same way that they might in other countries. So I don't think these concerns are actually that strongly based in the data or the evidence.
Prof, how should the government manage the challenges in improved running of the dorms, especially when it comes to cost as well as a tripod relationship among the government, dorm operators and employers of foreign workers?
There's actually a set of related problems here. So I think really three issues about. First, what kind of design standards do you want to achieve that strike a right balance between public health and living conditions and the cost of meeting those standards? How do you ensure that once you design and build a dorm according to those better standards, it's going to be maintained to a high standard? And finally, how do you do this cost effectively? And I think it's important to think about the cost aspect, because we're not just talking about cost to employers and Singaporeans. We're also talking about cost to migrant workers, because if we provide them with a higher quality standard of living, it comes out of the value that they generate. Spend more here, it could actually put downwards pressure on their wages, which is not what we actually want for them. So I think the current system, the problem with that, in my view, is that the dorm operators, in many cases, they're not directly accountable to workers. And that's because the employers are actually the customer of the dorm operators, not the workers. The employers make a block booking and they house their workers there. So, unless the workers can vote with their feet there's no pressure on the dorm operators to improve. And the operators are accountable to the government, but the problem there is they also have financial incentives to just meet the minimum standards and to try to reduce costs. Now, I think all of this suggests that we want or we should be rethinking the model of providing dorms for migrant workers. And it's not so different from problems that we have successfully overcome in other areas like public transport in Singapore. If you think about the old system, it had similar problems. The bus operators were only weakly accountable to commuters and the government. They had a lot of reason to cut costs to raise profits. In our new bus contracting system, it's the government who's responsible for providing high quality services. They engage the operators on a contract basis. The operators are accountable to government and commuters. And so there's no reason why we couldn't radically rethink how we provide housing for migrant workers as well. And we can, I think, do this in a way that ensures that we're accountable to all the stakeholders, and we can also do it more cost efficiently.
Well, going back to what we discussed earlier on some temporary sites moving to residential areas, to what extent will the public's response affect whether migrant workers can be housed in residential neighborhoods in the future, especially if the long-term goal is to become a more inclusive society?
Well, I think right now, from the plans that I've heard about, it looks like we're only going to be taking baby steps in that direction, because the plan right now, I believe, is to have the migrant workers live in some facilities near residential neighborhoods, where at least in this phase, to not be integrated really into the neighborhood. That is, what we're hearing is some of these initial facilities will be self-contained, and as self-contained facilities, the migrant workers will not actually be leaving their compounds even during their time off. But I think that if we want to try to accustom the public to the idea of migrant workers being in the area, we do need to actually recognize that migrant workers have a right to go to public and community spaces. In fact, they've always had this right. It's just that we don't typically see them in our heartland HDB areas because they tend to live quite far away. I think it's only with seeing them on a daily basis, in the hawker centers, in the shops and public transport, we'll get a much better sense that these are ordinary people just like you and me, And once I think we get that kind of sense and daily connection, I think things will be a lot easier. Of course, there will be some adaptation necessary. If they're living closer to us, we might learn that there are some things that they have to change in terms of habits, behavior, whatever, but that's no different from what we would have to do if we move to their countries and, they wanted us to fit in. We'd also have to change what we do a bit. So I think we have to have that experience of living on a daily basis, and then I think things will be better.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us and for your time as well. We've been speaking to nominated MP Walter Theseira, who's an associate professor from the School of Business at SUSS,